You're listening to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. In this show, you'll hear industry experts share tips of success and failure from their real estate investing journeys. You'll get a transparent look behind the curtain while you learn to fulfill the lifestyle you want to live and achieve your wealth goals. Get ready for the journey to financial freedom through investing in multifamily real estate. Here's your host, Blake Dailey.
Welcome back for another episode of the Multifamily Journey Podcast. I'm stoked to be bringing you guys another episode, and especially with today's guest, Jeremy Porto. This is episode 11 now, and the first 10 were so much fun. Spending the time with the caliber of people that have been on this show is a blast, and tons of good nuggets of information have come out just through the interviews. And I hope you're all getting as much from it as I am. And I really hope you guys have figured out by now that this show is focused on delivering value and not pitching products. So I hope that's apparent. This is really a show that's focused on multifamily investing and not on selling multifamily training courses or whatever product that may be. I want this to be the destination for getting real advice on how to invest. So I'm an investor first, and I think if you're looking for information to get started, then you probably are too. It's my hope that this podcast and really multifamilyjourney.com as a whole is where people can come and get real value, not bombarded by sales tactics or anything like that. I also wanted to thank everyone for the support so far. It's been so much fun to watch this podcast, get a lot more listens and downloads and everything, and see the engagement on social media. So if you guys like the show, please go leave a rating and review so we can keep spreading this thing and spreading the value that the show brings. And also thank you for the input from multifamilyjourney.com/podcast, where you can go in and ask questions that I'll review and ask on the show. I actually got the input that I should dig more into the specific deals that the investors have that come on the show to really kind of shed light on how people are finding them, financing them, fixing them up, and what the whole strategy is on the property. So this is a way people can get real examples and get a behind the scenes look of what doing multifamily deals today looks like. And on today's show, we dive into Jeremy's newly acquired 20 unit in Huntsville. And it was a really great discussion. Today, as I mentioned, interviewed Jeremy Porto. Jeremy is prior Air Force and now is a full-time investor. He started with residential properties and fourplexes, which he tells in the show how much he loves the fourplexes. But now he's expanding into commercial multifamily. We talked about how he was able to combine forces and find the team members who perfectly suit him for him and his skill set and how they all come together. Also, the ins and outs of this 20-unit deal and how COVID has affected him and his team and how they're dealing with it going forward. So a lot of good stuff in here. I think you guys are really going to like this episode. So let's get in the show with Jeremy. Jeremy, good morning and welcome to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. Glad you could come on.
Hey, Blake, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Well, I just kind of gave your intro, but why don't you give us an idea of where you got started on your real estate journey?
Yeah, it started with my right Achilles tendon, and I popped that in the middle of pilot training when I was in the Air Force, about halfway through pilot training, and when I'm having about 6 months to just lay on my back and recover. And during those times, you'd go to the library and grab books. So, all the HD TV shows were on. Actually, was HD TV even a thing back then? I don't know, but grabbed a stack of real estate books and just started devouring them. And really, that's where it started. And honestly, my evolution has been quite slow. I don't think I'm the smartest guy. I just think I work hard. So, I started off looking at like flipping or just single family rentals, and then, hey, man, if you have one single family rental, what about a fourplex? So then I got all in love with fourplexes and small multifamily, and did that for a while, and eventually stepped it up to larger apartments, which is kind of where I'm at now, and absolutely love it. So yeah, it's been a slow evolution, but I'm glad I'm where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's a cool story. So it just started serendipitously with you having an injury and just kind of getting your thoughts and thinking about what's next. So that's really cool. And then it sounds like you kind of had that natural evolution as an investor, like started with single family and then go to the small multifamily, and now you're in bigger apartment complexes. Can you speak to that kind of? I feel like there's always this mindset shift that has to take place before you think you can just go from doing a fourplex to 20 units or whatever it is, when it's not that big of a difference, but to you it feels like a really big difference. Can you speak to how you got through that?
Yeah, definitely. I actually kind of recently was able to kind of put this together, how I felt on this topic. But, no matter who you are, if you're the biggest guy in this business or you're the smallest guy in this business, there is a number, there is a size of a deal, there is something that makes you uncomfortable and you don't think you can do. So if you're brand new, maybe it's one unit, buying a single family rental. Oh my God, that's scary. I could never do that. I don't know how. I've never done it before. If you're the guy with 1,000 units, this sounds crazy, but it might be, oh man, I could never put together a fund that would then go and buy thousands of units at a time and make sure I keep those returns going. There's a number for everybody that's kind of scary. And so the more comfortable you feel with those bigger numbers, the sooner you'll be able to wrap your mind around it. And that's the first step to then go actually underwrite and buy and make offers and all that. And so I would honestly say, just get familiar, get comfortable thinking about big deals. And so, a couple of years ago for me, that was like, oh my God, a 20 unit building. Oh my God, a 40 unit building. I wouldn't even say the word 100 unit building. And, I would say maybe now I'm somewhere in the, I'm looking at 100 unit deals, but I don't know. I would even say the word 300 unit deal. I won't even look at that. That's too big for me. And it's limiting, but I mean, we all got to accept the biases and the shortcomings that we have. And so I would say, just get familiar, look at deals over and over again in the range that you want to be in. And you'll get there.
I think that's so true. Like when my wife and I went from our first just single family home to the next one was 2 units, I was like, man, there's all this extra square footage and it's going to be a bigger rehab. But just by doing it now, I think we could go do the same thing. No problem. I could do double that and it'd be no problem, because I've been through it. I've done the steps, and that's so true for people starting out. Is if you have that fear and that anxiety of the next step, just rolling the snowball down the hill, it builds, right? And it gets bigger and bigger, and your comfort level with the deal size just grows along with you. So I think that's really cool. So Jeremy, for you kind of made that progression. You made it snowball. So what's your portfolio look like today?
So it's kind of, harkens back to like my beginnings. I've got a lot of fourplexes right now. I think I've got 10 or 12 somewhere in there. And then I got a 13 unit building, pretty close to you, Panhandle of Florida. And then we just closed on a 20 unit building, me and a couple of JV partners. So all that other stuff I own by myself. The 20 unit I own with partners. And then I'm a general partner on a couple of syndications, one in South Carolina and one in Texas. So you can kind of see the direction I'm going. The fourplexes were kind of before, and I've been asked before, well, okay, now that you're focused on larger stuff, because I sold all my single families. I had a lot of single families and I sold them all. And someone asked me, will you sell the fourplexes and move on? And I don't know if I can get rid of those, because I like them so much, and they're easy and they're comfortable. So I don't know, maybe I'll just continue I'll keep those. Those will be my personal portfolio. And then obviously I'll have my joint venture portfolio and syndicated portfolio as well.
Yeah. That's very nice. Those fourplexes could almost turn into, the ones you have owned outright, and they're just cash flowing like tanks down the road, and they're just cool. I like fourplexes too. So start with the fourplexes and the 13 unit, and now this JV on a 20 unit on top of some syndication stuff as a general partner. So how do you, is all that with different people, different groups, or is it kind of all under one roof? How are you managing all that together?
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I won't say full circle, but I did all the single family and small multifamily fourplex stuff, and that's all on my own. The JV partners, well, actually, let me go to the syndicated stuff first. That came about because I just made myself available and bugged the hell out of a guy that I respected, and basically forced him to put me on his team in a sense, get me involved. I took him to lunch several times, and he's an ex-Air Force guy, and so I think that maybe helped out. He kind of took me under his wing a little bit. I think in the Air Force, the military in general, there's always that kind of mentorship feel, and I was fortunate enough that he kind of pulled that into the multifamily realm. And so I will continue to go down that path with him and partner with him, co-sponsor deals together, when it makes sense. I will say my biggest focus now is the joint venture stuff. I've got 3 partners that I absolutely love. And those kind of just fell into place. The first 2, the first one was, he's local to me. We met through this syndicated gentleman that I was talking about that we met through one of his meetups. And then we met our second partner from the first. He met him at a conference, and then the third, we just added her. I was out in Huntsville looking at a deal and seen her on Facebook, and it kind of made sense the things that she was talking about. And so I said, hey, you want to grab coffee? So I drove down to Birmingham, met her, and now she's on the team too. And I think that's it. I think that's our core team right there. I don't know that we want to expand that, but it's beautiful. I love it. And so I went from, personal stuff doing only on my own to looking at syndicated stuff, which I'm not knocking. I think it's good, but I think I've now found my comfort spot right here in the JV, and just kind of working with people that I already know, and I know their stuff. So kind of took a full step forward to syndicated, and then I don't know that you want to call it a step back, but it's certainly not in the same ballpark, I would say.
Yeah, definitely a little bit different. So let's unpack that, because I think there's a lot of good stuff there. So going back to the syndication stuff, you said you found a guy and he was essentially doing what you wanted to do, and you went after him and took him to lunch and somehow provided value. So what role do you have in that general partnership, and what kind of value you're providing that partnership?
Yeah. So we actually got started in a deal that ultimately never closed, which is really sad. But in that first deal, I was going to help guarantee the loan. So I had just mentioned to him, like, hey, I've got net worth and liquidity that I want to put to use. So I hear all the time that people say, hey, you can sponsor a deal for somebody, and do you have a need for that? And he said, well, you know what, we're actually a little shy on this next deal that we're doing. We need a little bit more net worth and liquidity. So we talked about it, and I signed up with him, and that was going to be phenomenal. As part of that, I was doing the due diligence with them. I was looking at the underwriting with them. I was going to raise capital with them, and basically do it all. They were leading the deal, and they were basically handing me out smaller pieces to handle on my own. But basically be a co-sponsor, no different than them. Maybe the volume of work was higher on their end, but no different than them as far as really, kind of understanding the whole thing and helping put it together, being a true team member on that one. And then it was pretty much the same thing there on out for the future deals that we got involved in. The latest one was 146 units in South Carolina. Same thing. I went out there with them, did the due diligence trip, walked units, made my input on the underwriting, raised capital with them. I'm now helping with the asset management as far as getting on the calls with the property manager and discussing what's going on and what direction we need to go. And then taking care of the investors involved in the deal, all that stuff. Pretty much anything you need to do to run a real estate syndication, I'm doing it with them.
Yeah, and that's really good, because now you get insight into that for your own partnership. You get the experience as you grow your portfolio. It's going to make you that much more proficient in all things syndication, multifamily, so on and so forth. But to break it back a little bit, I think this is really important for the listeners to hear. So you started out and you had a piece that he needed for his deal. You had the liquidity. You could sign on as the sponsor. And, maybe for the listeners, that's not them specifically. Maybe they can't sign for a loan, but maybe they can go run the due diligence checklist on a project. Maybe they have access to capital. Maybe it's a family member or a friend or whatever that they can bring to the deal. So basically, by providing value to this guy and to his syndication team, you were able to get in, learn from, build your own portfolio, and get chunks of the deal. So that's kind of how I started with, not in multifamily, but just on the residential side with wholesaling and flipping and rehabbing. Found partners that were doing it. They had the experience, and I had just the drive to go out there and find deals or put deals together, whatever it was. And like, we all grew together, and I gained a lot of experience to go do my own rehabs myself. And it kind of lowered the learning curve for me. It did the same for you. And I think that's so important for people to hear, is just you don't have to do a 100-unit deal by yourself round one, right? On the first try. Like, find others you can align with, find that piece that you can bring to the table, and scale so much quicker. So I think that's awesome. So that's a really good point to make. And now on the JV side, you have, you said 3 partners, right?
Correct.
Okay. So there's 4 of you together. So what role are you doing in that partnership, and how is everybody syncing together to continue to build your portfolio there?
Yeah, instead of calling them partners, I'll actually name them, because it just gets confusing. So the first was Stuart, Rich, and I, Stuart Dukeman, Rich Trepanier. And Stuart and I were kind of the all over thing. We were underwriting deals. We were making the connections, talking to brokers, trying to partner with people. It started off kind of slow. And then Rich got added in as he owns a multifamily construction company, Gage Multifamily Services in Austin. And so everybody talks about value add multifamily. Well, shoot, what's the biggest way to add value? It's renovate and raise rents. So Rich has that multifamily construction experience. He was a perfect add-in.
Yeah, I think I actually heard him speak on Whitney Sewell's podcast about value add multifamily and kind of the scope of what his company does on the construction side. So that was really cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like I said, everybody thinks about multifamily value add, and nobody really thinks about that, construction piece of it. And if you're doing construction on 100 units and putting $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a door into a building,
huge expense.
What does that look like? That's huge. That's a big moving piece. Rich has that experience, and so obviously that was huge for us to add in. And then the last partner, her name's Candace. She's in Birmingham. She was, like I said, she was just someone I saw on Facebook. I had asked a question about something in Huntsville. She responded. We started talking, and I said, hey, let's grab coffee next time I'm there. I was doing due diligence on a personal deal, and she's been a phenomenal ad. I mean, this is not like what makes her great, but I will say, being local, having somebody in the local market is huge. We're working on an LOI now, and some of the lending, the agency lending that we're looking at really requires us to be within 100 miles, and she's 95 miles away, so it's perfect. But more importantly, she's a great underwriter. She's got great connections in that area. The 20 unit deal that we just did, she was the one that provided the contact for the lender, and we got phenomenal rates and terms on that deal on the lending side. So she's been a great ad. And then for myself, I would kind of say maybe I'm the workhorse. Maybe I'm the guy that just kind of goes a million miles an hour. And sometimes they got to pull me back in and reel me in. But I think that's important sometimes to make sure you're continuing on. I mean, just for a little bit of perspective, Rich, Stewart, and I, we were just looking. We started talking about 11 months ago, and we just closed our 20 unit deal. And I think that it's everyone says it's a rapid ramp up from here. So shoot, we're knock on wood, today, tomorrow, we're here back on an LOI we just submitted. But we expect to go a bit faster now that we've got the full team together. And
yeah, that's awesome. It's kind of the law of the first deal. And though you've all done deals individually, like as a group, right? This is your first one. And then I always hear this too. And I've seen it on the residential side, but you get your first deal and it scales up. The second one comes so much easier. So that's good. You guys are at that point now. And speaking of this first deal as a group with all of you together, can we break out this 20 unit? I think it'd be really good for the listeners to hear about this 20 unit purchase, because I think that's a really digestible size for people listening to, right? It's not some 1,000 unit place in downtown LA, right? It's a 20 unit value add apartment complex. So very digestible. So you just closed on this, and kind of want to get started with just on the basics. How'd you find this 20 unit deal?
Yeah, I do have to go back real quick and talk about Stuart, my other partner, because I meant to come back to him and I didn't. Stuart is the business guy. This man has been he's had a labor finding business for, God, I don't know, decades now. Some might joke centuries, but we joke about his age. But he has knowledge that none of us have. And I mean, there was a deal we were looking at the other day, and we were all looking at it in the traditional way. And he said, well, what if you do this and look at it this way? And suddenly the numbers just made sense. Like you couldn't believe. That's not a deal that we wound up getting, but that's the value that I see Stuart bringing. I call him the businessman. So anyways,
that's awesome.
You asked about, I had to say that I couldn't let that go.
Yes. You guys have all the pieces. I think that's important to touch on. If you leave out Stuart, you might leave out that whole deal. So
exactly. So the 20 unit deal, how do we find it? This is actually a really funny story. I was in Huntsville for due diligence on, I don't even remember what it was. I think it was a fourplex I was buying. I'm still buying them because they're easy. And I was just driving around looking at comps and just seeing what was in the area. And I drove by a building and I was like, man, that looks like a really nice building. I need to call the owner on that one and see, if they'd be interested in selling. And I get back to my hotel room, and Rich texts me and says, "Hey, have you seen this?" And it popped up on LoopNet, and it was the exact building I had just looked at. I was like, "No way, you gotta be kidding me!" And so I immediately called the broker and I said, "Look, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm not local. I'm leaving tomorrow on a plane early. Any way I can get into one of the units today, or can we talk about it?" We started talking for a while. Ultimately, I wasn't gonna be able to get in there, but at least he knew I was serious. I mean, he saw that I was non-local and in the area looking at other real estate. So eventually that deal went under contract with somebody else. And it fell through though. We kept eyes on it. It fell through, and we had already underwritten it. So we instantly, we knew we wanted it. So we put the LOI in immediately. And we went back, I think once, twice, and then it was under LOI, and we moved forward.
Man, talk about fate. Talk about fate. What an awesome story there. So didn't get it right away, had to go through some trials and tribulations and ended up getting this thing on the second round. So let's talk about that. How'd you end up negotiating this deal?
Well, I'll tell you what, you have to buy right. I'm gonna start by saying that you cannot overpay. And so we underwrote conservatively, and considering all the value add, and we didn't think we were going to bump rents $100 per unit or $200. I mean, that's totally possible. Depends on the deal. But, we were looking at a very modest rent bump based on what comps had said. When we made our offer, I think we were about 100,000 off of where they were. And they came back and countered one time at about 50,000. So they basically split the difference, which, Chris Voss would say don't do. And
great book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Definitely read that if you're looking to negotiate better.
Agreed. Definitely. And ultimately we looked at, hey, well, we plugged that in. Well, what does this look like? What does this do to our returns? Are we comfortable with this? And in the end, yes, we were comfortable with where the returns came out. We had a lot of room. We stress tested on vacancy. We stress tested on, hey, if we don't get these rent bumps. And ultimately it all worked out. It made sense to us. COVID was obviously a consideration in this. So when we underwrote this deal, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it was either 1% or 0 organic rent growth, aside from what we thought we could bump the rents after renovations. But for the first, I think 2 years, it was either 0 or 1%. And then I think year 3, we put in 2% rent growth after that. Now this is in Huntsville, Alabama, which is the fastest growing small market in America. It's got Toyota factory being built that's going to bring 4,000 jobs over the next 10 years. FBI is looking to bring a second headquarters there. There's a tremendous amount of space industry in that area. It's on a huge growth path. So for us to put 2% in year 3 and on is quite conservative. And when those numbers still work, it made sense to us. Now, when I look at it,
that's huge. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, but when you look at it on a price per door, it actually looks really high. And I couldn't tell you exactly why that is, but we underwrote looking conservatively at the things that make sense to us. How much are we going to spend? We bumped in. I think we wound up doubling our renovation budget from the initial talks to make sure that we were conservative. We kept, I think our rent bump is in the $50 or $60 range. And maybe we'll get there, but we just saw the other day, we're probably way under on that. We could probably hit $100 actually, just looking at it after we close, looking at some of the comps. So ultimately, I think this is going to be a good one, despite the, we might have passed on this just based at looking at a price per door. But when you look at the whole model out, 5-7 years, I think we're holding to 7 years as the plan. It makes sense.
Yeah. When in underwriting, which I want to talk about a little bit more because there's a lot of good stuff in there, but when in underwriting, you don't want to just get hung up on one metric that maybe says the deal is good or not, right? You have to look at the whole picture, especially if you're planning on buying and holding this property. Year 1 might not be a great indication of the total, 10-year hold time. So that's really good. So to break it out a little bit, you were talking about you had value add on the rent bumps by the renovations. So say, and I kind of want to, this is kind of a question. So say if rents are at 600 and you could renovate the property to get rents to 700, you factored that in, but on top of that 700 for the first year, at least you planned on 0 to 1% rent growth. And then back to year 2 or 3, that's when you're projecting, the normal 2 to 3% past that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it gets a little confusing to not have something in front of you, but Yes. So we call organic rent growth, that 1, 2, 3, 4%, whatever it is, rent growth that you get just based on, the area appreciating,
just the
more
market
people
going
coming
up.
in. Right. So that we keep low early on. And then the rent bump you get from actually renovating, we'll put that in there, and we have a schedule. So it's not $100 per unit, boom, the day we buy it. I think on this one, we don't stop. It's a graduated increase. And I don't think it stops in this one till somewhere in the second year. So, in the first year, I think it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months or so of nothing. And that's conservative because I think we actually are. We're going to turn one here real fast. That's conservative, but we don't actually show the increase in rent until like month 6 or so. And it doesn't end until somewhere in the middle of year 2.
Yeah. Because looking on the spreadsheet's one thing, but actually implementing that plan is another, right? You have to actually turn the units and you have to fill the units. So that's important to consider when you're running your spreadsheet and doing your numbers. And I think what you're talking there is the same thing we're doing with GrowthView. My syndication group is, taking out or very minimizing the organic rent growth from the purchase price. Cause I think all the projections are at least through 2021 seeing very flat to maybe -1% rent growth. And then come 2022 gets back to kind of normal pre-COVID with, normal 2 to 3% or whatever. Huntsville is probably more like 4 or 5%, which is why I've been looking there too. And I'm glad we're talking about this early because we don't have enough listeners yet to just flood the Huntsville market. But yeah, there's a lot of good signs that the demographics are all there for that market. So there should be no problem with rent growth. But it's an important thing to consider if you're looking to go invest in Cleveland with 0.8% annual rent growth over the last 20 years, or a market like Huntsville where it's like 5 to 7% the last 3 years. So all those things are important for your underwriting. And back to the negotiation piece, you kind of factored all this in, and you were 100,000 under. They split the difference, and then did you guys strike at that price and get the contract?
Yeah, we did, and there was a lot of discussion on our team, like, hey, do we try to get this even better? Do we go another 10, 20, 30,000 lower than where they're at now? And we went back and forth quite a bit within our team. And ultimately our thought was, we're happy at the number that's there. It makes sense. The returns make sense. We think we can execute this plan. To try to shave off $10, $20, $30,000 and maybe lose the deal or tick off the seller. I think a decent negotiating tactic is leave a little something on the table because you never know what's going to happen later. And let me fast forward to due diligence. We found out that they did a good job on the units, but they very much neglected AC units. And so that's just one of a couple of things. But, we said, shoot, we got to replace a number of these AC units. And so we ultimately came back to them and got a credit for that and a few other things, smaller things, but that was the AC was the biggest thing. And so, had we tried to push them on even just $10,000, I don't know that we would have gotten I think it was a $20,000 credit where we wound up with at the end. I don't know that would have happened. And so maybe we would have gained 10, but lost 20. And so net lost 10. Who knows? You can't go back and find out, but ultimately we settled at their counter, to keep them in our favor and because here's the other thing. The long game is, we know this broker and this seller have a lot more deals coming down the road. We know that. We looked up what they own. He had said that to us already, he being the broker, the listing broker. And sure enough, we've already been talking about, what the next deal is here, that they've got coming down. So the long game is maintain that good relationship and, don't try to crush everybody in your negotiations, to win on the front there. Cause what else are you going to do after that? They're not going to want to work with you anymore.
Yeah. That's good because if the numbers work, right, just get the deal. Don't be, think with the long-term in mind because right. It's your relationship with the broker. Does that, who's he going to bring the next deal to, right? The people that were smooth there in closing and he got his commission check and, does that seller have more properties to sell in the future? They're going to go with the people that close smoothly. So yeah, that's important. Don't over negotiate. know when it's important to negotiate, right? If you get those credits because during due diligence, you find something that really changes the numbers for you to make the deal not work, but just be fair. Think there's somebody else on the other side of that transaction too, right? And don't lose the deal over, what could be something petty that turns out that your opportunity cost was this good deal. If you would have just kind of sucked it up and, swallowed your pride a little bit just to
make the deal happen. So that's good. So you mentioned your partner Candace, the state. Candace got really favorable loan terms with her lending relationship. What were the terms of this property on this recent close?
Yeah, so I'll just say real quick as contrast, we're looking at another deal. We're comparing with this lender that we've got with agency debt, and everyone's like, oh, agency debt. And so what we actually wound up with was a 3.75% interest rate. It was a 10-year term, which was important to us to have, 10 years or longer to make sure that we got past whatever the next downturn was, whenever it would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the long-term debt was important to us. It was safe. It was a 25-year AM, and that came because of the age of the property. And I also believe pretty heavily that the strength of our team, because he was initially talking a 20-year AM, and I think that would have killed the deal. It's funny, there's a big difference in cash flow and therefore safety between a 20-year AM and a 25-year. Ultimately, we got 25. Yep. He was,
and for those of listening, that's the length of time the loan is amortized. So with a 20-year amortization, your payment is going to be higher than a 25-year amortization, because extending the loan out, you pay more interest, but your payment each month is lower. So what Jeremy's saying here is that his cash flow is a lot higher because they got the amortization extended. And that sounds pretty similar to all my commercial loans too, like the term. So
yeah. And I mean, important to us is that safety. And so, having a high cash on cash return indicates safety to us, because if things go poorly, we can eat into the cash flow before we ever go negative. If it's high,
when you have a higher debt service coverage ratio, there's more cash flow to pay off the debt.
Yep.
So
that's another way to say it. Yep. The higher the debt service coverage, we can pay off the debt and still have a lot left over to be able to pay anything else and ourselves.
Yep. Yeah, that's super good. So we talked about a little bit on this deal with the negotiation, but how did you guys actually perform the due diligence and even, decide that, hey, these ACs are broken and we need a credit for them? So what did the due diligence look like for you guys on this 20 unit?
There is no better asset class for building wealth than real estate. And in most instances, people don't have the time or energy to invest in it on their own. So how do you build wealth with real estate when you lack the time and energy? Leave that to the GrowthView Properties. The GrowthView team finds, negotiates, and manages multifamily assets for private investors. Their mission is to help investors secure the ultimate asset, which is time, all the while impacting the greater good with their endowment fund that fuels the mission of charitable organizations. Find out more by going to thegrowthview.com. That's view with a VUE.com. Put your money to work so you don't have to at thegrowthview.com.
Yeah, we inspected the units. We showed up. We had an inspector show up, and we had a normal inspector show up, not like a tradesman. Basically, just to kind of give us a sampling of the units. We got into, well, with the exception of one, we got into all of them, and then we felt very comfortable with Rich, being that he's got the construction background, to look at all the trades types stuff. As we were kind of noting the ages and what they looked like, Rich made it clear at the end when he pulled it all together that they look, I don't remember the exact numbers, but 10 out of 20 or 8 out of 20 AC units are, on their last leg. They're 28 years old, and we're going to be having to replace these here real soon. And so it's fairly data oriented. I mean, the same case with water heaters. How old were they? And the ones that were young, okay, we could obviously expect them to last longer, but the old ones, not so much. We had a budget for that. Some of the other stuff was just easy to find. I mean, there was one very clear deficiency in countertops. I don't know why, but a lot of the countertops were kind of like there were all the laminate countertops, and in the very front lip, the filler was basically just kind of falling out, and so it was not I don't know what word to use here, hardy. It wasn't strong, and so that was clear to us that was going to need to get redone.
Yeah, that's good. So when you walked the properties or had the inspector in each one, did you go with them in all of the units, or did somebody in the team, was it Rich, did they go through each one of those units?
Yeah, I every unit got walked by at least one of our teammates, the four of us, and I think I walked all of them. I think, and then I think everybody else was kind of like bouncing around to make sure they hit the things that they needed to hit. Yeah. And no, we did not ask our inspector to look at all of them. We took kind of because he was just an inspector and not like a tradesman, there was limited value to get out of him, but we thought it was worthwhile to do at least 4 or 5 units. So I think we did 5 units with him, and then the rest of us walked all of them. And then I think Rich walked them all as well, every single one of them. Cool. And with him being basically the guy to get eyes on the technical stuff.
Yeah, he's got all the experience there. So do you think for people looking at their own properties, it's important that they walk every single unit, or can they rely on an inspector? What do you think there?
Well, what you want me to say is that they should have an inspector walk every unit, and they should as well. I agree with that to an extent. I have I'll call it a varsity level mindset. JV to me is, here's the book rule, right? And if you follow the book rule, you're JV level. But sometimes the varsity level is going against the book, but with good reason, not just because you want to save money or anything like that. My varsity answer is, who's on your team? So in our case, we've got Rich, right? He'll walk units, and he kind of knows that stuff. If you are bringing a normal inspector, I think there is limited value there, because half the time they will write down, hey, this looks like a problem. You might want to get an electrical guy to look at it. Hey, this looks like a problem. You might want to get a plumbing guy to look at it. So there's limited value they're actually providing you in that walkthrough. So you can either not hire him at all, which I don't think that's the right answer, or you could hire a plumber, an electrician, an HVAC guy, all the different trades, and have them all walk through. And those guys you're going to pay to be there, and then you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on all these tradesmen coming out there. So our middle ground was, well, we've got Rich who's experienced in this, and we'll bring an inspector out there to just look at 4 or 5 units just to give us a sampling of the basics. And so we felt comfortable with that. So if you're brand new, get the tradesman out there to look at everything, and you look at everything as well. If you are more experienced, or you have someone on your team that kind of does that, and you kind of understand what you're getting, then maybe you can look at kind of alternate routes. The age played a role in this. This was 1985. This was 60s. I don't know that we would have done that, right? We did actually get a plumber to come out and scope the lines. So we did do that, because obviously you just can't see that stuff unless you scope it. Yeah. But that was kind of our thought. It was kind of we thought about that before we just said, oh, we're only going to inspect 5 units with an inspector.
Yeah. And I think that's a good gray area too, right? Because if it's an older property with a bigger rehab scope, you might want to get in there and see every single thing so you can build a more thorough rehab plan. But if it's a newer property, this one's, 1985, so not that old as far as properties are concerned, and it's not in terrible shape. Maybe it's, you walk through every single unit to make sure they're kind of all up to snuff, and there's not any big problems. Because usually if you walk in a unit, you can smell if there's, a mold issue. You can see if, there's a leak or something like that. I mean, if you have the experience, and if you've rehab a property, or, if you've come from flipping houses, like walking those units should be, sufficient to you on top of getting inspectors. So that's really good. If you're newer and you don't feel comfortable, like, yes, pay the extra monies to avoid having a mistake that you might have missed. But if you've seen some things, like, I think that's the varsity level, like you're talking about, right? It's kind of up to you. So that's good. So now that the property is closed, what's the operational plan? I know you're talking value add multifamily, but can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So as we were under contract, well, before we wrote the LOI and as we were under contract, the very simple plan was, we'll do targeted renovations, LVP flooring, throughout was pretty important. That's for durability. And it is also just an upgrade, getting a modern paint scheme, and then getting cabinets and appliances to kind of just spruce up the kitchen a little bit nicer. So we weren't going crazy and doing absolutely, it wasn't a full gut job or anything like that. Doing those targeted upgrades, we imagined that we would see about a $60 rent bump. Fast forward to now, we've just closed, and we're actually starting to look at these units that we've got. We had one vacant, and at the last second, we had a second one come vacant. And so as we now own the property and we go out and look at comps, what we were anticipating was do the renovations and get the rents to $625 a month. What we just saw was, dang, there's a possibility that we don't have to do anything except make it clean, safe, and functional, fix the things that are broken. But as far as upgrades, there's a chance that we don't have to do anything and get a $650 rent. So spend no money and get bigger rent bump. we're playing with that right now. So the first unit we basically just gave to our property manager, said put it up for 650, and we're testing it out to see what happens. We're at the same time, we're going to take the other unit, we're going to renovate that pretty nicely, and then see what that can get. So basically, we're trying to see what is our
A/B split test.
The which? Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, it's like an A/B test. No, that's really good. So, what are you planning on the renovated units? Is like a 700 for like the full job?
Well, so as I said, being very conservative, initially as we started this, we were going to spend the money and get 625. So if we get 650 and do nothing, right, then obviously we imagine maybe not, maybe that's the max regardless of what you do. But we imagine that if we renovate, maybe we'll get 675, 700. We'll kind of cross that bridge as we renovate and then relook at comps, see what's out there that just rented, what makes sense, and then list it at that point. But obviously, we're hoping for higher than 650 if we can take a classic unit and get 650.
Yeah, and I think you're in a really good spot there. I saw something that kind of blew my mind when I went to Huntsville to look at a couple multifamily properties and meet the brokers and all that stuff. In Southwest Huntsville, right outside of Redstone, there was this property. I think it was 12 units. It was completely rehabbed, full gut job. I mean, they did a full job on this, new concrete driveway, street lights. I mean, they did the whole 9 yards on this place. And inside they put like swinging barn doors and floating shelves, really nice fixtures. I mean, it looked like the top of the market, but they're small, like 1 bedroom. I think they're like 650 or 700 square feet. So pretty small. And these things were renting for like $1,000 a month. So because and that was like what, $200 rent premiums in this area. So they rehabbed it really nice. And I think because of Huntsville specifically, this probably isn't in every market, because you have like the federal jobs, NASA and the space jobs, and all the new tech jobs and Toyota manufacturing. Like there's a lot of high paying workers in the area, and income is growing as well. So yeah, I like that. I like that area a lot for renovating and just value add in general. So I want to know how that one works out. I'm gonna touch base in a couple of weeks.
Well, shoot, we closed on the first, and I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. We just saw the broker put out the deal across the street, literally across the street from us. Much bigger deal, includes 2s, 3s, 1s, 2s, and 3s bedrooms. But if that goes through at what we're seeing, that would be phenomenal for us, as to say that we bought right in the end. So
is yours all 1-bedroom units?
These are all 1-bedroom units.
Okay. And which area is this? Is like Southwest Huntsville?
This is, I'd say West Huntsville.
West Huntsville. Okay. Yeah, that's good. So are you guys going to put in the LOI for the one across the street now too? And
we talked about that. We laughed about it. And well, again, another funny story. Candace, who's our connections person, actually saw that deal come across her desk from a broker who said, "You cannot share this with anyone. I'm only sending this to X number of people." And Candace said, "Can I share it with my partners? Obviously, I'm going to look at this and would love their input." And that broker said no. Candace had an internal struggle and ultimately kept it to herself. I think that was the right choice. But she had a long time. She was waiting to tell us. And 2 days ago, she said, "Hey, I can share this now because it finally listed, publicly here." But we talked about it. She underwrote it, and she was coming off a couple thousand off of where they were per door. Ultimately, we probably won't, but she looked at it for sure. And we'll probably, after we get through this latest LOI that we just put out, we're hoping to hear back today or tomorrow. Maybe we will take a peek at that again and see what it looks like.
I like it. You guys are rolling. You guys are rolling. All right. So before we move on kind of to the next section, I wanted to really touch on why value add multifamily is, I don't know, it's just such a great strategy. You're doing it. You've seen the benefits pay off. I've done value adds since I've started. And I just feel like the returns are a little bit better. Like the work is more, and we've kind of touched on reasons throughout, but for you, why value add?
Yeah. So I've already said that safety is very important to us. Cash flow, cash is king. Cash flow is king. If you are buying property specifically for appreciation, it's risky. And if you give the property back, you're done. That's going to be career changing, I would say. So we invest where we can get cash flow. However, if you just get cash flow and that's it, some stabilized deal that you're just going to make a solid, 7, 8, 9%, whatever it's going to be, whatever your minimum is on the deal. and you get nothing else, your returns you're safe, but your returns aren't high. So cash flow keeps you safe. Value add gives you the real big return that keeps you on a growth oriented path. So you have to have both. And so the cash flow, I think mostly, I think both of those are dependent on the market. If you're in a high growth market, like we believe Huntsville is, and it's in the Southeast, generally speaking, the Southeast has cash flow. Obviously got to buy right. So if you can do those two things together, you can have big growth numbers and you can be safe while you're doing it. That's why I like value add.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good explanation of it. So really in real estate in general, you have your 4 revenue drivers. It's cash flow, appreciation, depreciation, and equity pay down. And right there, you're just talking about the first 2, cash flow and appreciation. And why value add is so good to me, and I think, Jeremy, you would agree, is because you can have appreciation irregardless of your market, because you're forcing the appreciation with your rehab. You're increasing the value by, doing the renovations. And then if you're also in a high growth market like Huntsville, or just in a place that's going to see maybe average or above average, you still get market appreciation on top of your forced appreciation, plus you're cash flowing the whole time. So that's what I love about value add, especially in multifamily, because the numbers are a lot bigger, right? You can expand that out. So value add multifamily is awesome to me. Yeah. So, did you want to touch on something there?
No, but if you don't mind, there was you asked me about the terms, and I wanted to just kind of finish that out because I think there was an important thing to learn there. But I did not mention that on this deal, we got 80% loan to cost. Loan to cost meaning he would give us 80% of the purchase price of the property and 80% of the renovation money. So we submitted a budget, right? So that's not only do we get the max leverage, which helps, we're also getting some of those renovation dollars. That's huge. And we got 12 months of IO, interest only. So the first 12 months, the cash flow is going to look pretty decent. That's safe. Now, the point that I wanted to make there, like the takeaway is, you can't do that. You can't negotiate, if you will, or show, a strong team and get trust with your lender on an agency deal. You're going to pretty much get what they're going to say you're going to get.
What they offer.
That's kind of it, right? So I really liked working with this lender and being able to kind of massage that. And he saw we were a strong team. We sat down in person, all 4 of us in his office, and talked with him. He saw we were strong. He saw that we were experienced when we talked with him about the deal. And so, he even said we got probably the best interest rate that he was giving at that time. He said, somebody else might have gotten like 3.95 or 4. We got 3.75. He was not initially, our first talk, he said no IO. After we talked further and got further into it, he agreed to 12 months of IO. And then, like I said,
which is interest only for the listeners, which, you're just paying interest instead of the principal, lower payments. Your loan balance doesn't go down, but your cash flow is a lot higher for that rehab period.
Yep. It speaks to the safety. So while you're spending money on renovations, you can have a lower payment to make that first year a little easier. So ultimately the takeaway there was, I really like the bank because we could kind of get what we wanted. Assuming we showed him what he needed to see, we could kind of negotiate and get what we wanted.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to transition, but what you just said was like, no, that's such good stuff. I want to break it down a little bit more before we do. So can you speak to why interest only, and on this deal specifically, and maybe kind of give an example of why it's better? And then I wanted to talk about loan to cost versus loan to value, because I think those are really important distinctions. So let's start with the interest only, because I think this is really good for people to hear.
Sure. Interest only is, like I said, from the investor's perspective, it's a safety net, because if you're paying, let's just go to the extreme. Let's say no payments at all. For the first 12 months, no payments. How much more comfortable are you that in that year 1 where you're throwing out a ton of money into renovations, but if you don't have to pay anything for the debt, well, guess what? There's virtually no chance you're going to have to give the property back in year 1, right? So obviously it's not no payments, it's interest only, which brings the payment down. It just makes you feel more comfortable. I would be cautious and say, do not get into a deal where the interest only is what makes it work year 1. It needs to work with year 1 without interest only. And then interest only is just the bonus to kind of help you out. all the banks will say that as well. You have to meet the minimum debt service coverage ratio without interest only. And if it does, and if it warrants interest only, which is usually in some kind of renovation, if it's stabilized deal, probably you're not getting IO. It's very important that it works without the IO. So that's the IO piece. That's what's great about it. One other caution is you'll hear sometimes about people taking IO 5 years out, for first 5 years IO. That's great on your cash flow. It makes your returns look good up front. What's dangerous about it is come 5 years from now, you don't know what's going to be happening. And again, you're probably banking on that five years of IO to make it work. 5 years later, market is softer, and now your debt service jumps to P and I, and you can't cover the debt service. That could be a problem. So again, it's definitely a benefit to get IO, make your returns look nicer, but you do have to be careful that the deal still works without it.
Yeah, and I think you kind of want to be careful extending it out too long, because I just talked about the 4 revenue drivers, and the fourth one there is equity pay down, right? You have no equity pay down when you do interest only, but there's other benefits because your cash flow, the first revenue driver, goes up. So you don't want to, you want to hold a 30-year mortgage and have interest only the whole 30 years because your principal doesn't move at all. So if you have $1 million loan and over 30 years you pay interest only, well, at 30 years, you still have the full $1 million due. So it's important to think about and when to use interest only versus when to use, amortized loans. And right now, what Jeremy's saying, and when you're doing a value add project, it increases your safety, right? You have more cash flow because you're putting money into the property. And then at some point, like Jeremy, when does this transition to principal?
At 12 months. So we get 12 months.
Okay, so it's 12-month interest only. So, come month 13, he'll be paying principal and interest. But like he was saying, most of the value add is going to be done by that point.
Right.
So, yeah, that's really good stuff. And then loan to cost is the other one I want to break out. The differences there and like when somebody would want to use one versus the other.
Yeah. In both of these instances, IO and loan to cost generally come with a value add deal. A lender is typically not going to give you either in a stabilized deal. But the idea is if you're buying a property for $1 million and you're putting in $200,000 for renovations, LTV would say you'd get 80% of the million. So you'd get $800,000 in the loan. You'd put out $200,000 for your down payment, and then you'd put out another $200,000 for the renovations. So now you're putting out $400,000. If you look at that in the total scope of the thing, you're basically bringing a third of what is necessary to close the deal in both down payment and renovation. That's excluding closing costs, obviously. So loan to cost would say, hey, as a lender, I know you're putting a lot of money into the deal. Why not count some of that money that's going into the deal and raising the value of the deal? Why not count some of that towards your equity? So I will lend you 80% of the property, of the purchase price, and 80% of the renovations. The reason they're willing to do that is they know your renovations are going to raise the value. They'll still have, a decent leverage. They'll still have 80% leverage when it's done. Although you may be getting, I'm making this number up, 99% leverage if you just look at the purchase price on the whole thing. When the renovations are done, they'll still be at 80%. And again, they're only going to do that if you're putting value into the property, if it's a value add deal, if it's a significant value add. Each lender will draw the line where they think for what significant is. But that's why that's so valuable. You can put less money into the deal. Obviously, that raises your cash flow. It also does the same thing that IO does, which is now you've got a higher loan size. So it's also something you want to just be careful of. You probably won't get it, but don't try to get it on a stabilized deal.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, great explanation of those two things. I think just that kind of adds the tools into the toolbox of, investors looking to go out and do these deals. And the more you understand those, the more tools you have in your toolbox to be able to use, get better loan terms, get better returns. If you're using investors, be a better steward of their money. So all those things, so important. And I'm glad we took the time to dig into that stuff. And honestly, if this is your first time hearing this, like back up like a minute or two and just listen to what Jeremy just said again, because that stuff is so important. Excuse me there. But yeah, so Jeremy, thank you for diving into that 20 unit and in talking about kind of the terms that go into it. So now let's transition to the last section of the show, what I like to call the Fortune 5, the 5 questions I ask every guest at the end here. So let's kick it off. What's the biggest thing that has contributed towards your success?
I would probably say work ethic and not giving up. I told you guys already, it's been 11 months since Stuart and Rich and I first started talking. And I think it was even longer than just Stuart and I were talking. And here we are just closing our first deal. There was a lot of frustrating moments. There was a broker in particular that kept handing us deals. And then I don't know how to say this, but he was not really treating us with respect, I don't think. And we would constantly get so close to getting a deal and then it was gone. And he wouldn't even tell us about it for 3 days. And we'd say, hey, we're just waiting to hear back on that LOI. Oh yeah, I went under contract last week. And we're like, excuse me? And so that is really frustrating. We just continued, we all at one point talked the other two into continuing. And Candace has not gone through that with us because she's relatively new to the team, but I know she has gone through that on her own. So I think work ethic got us through that. That's been the biggest reason that we've been successful.
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes you just have to be prepared to go a year or almost a year and not see any success, because if you have the fortitude to make it through that, when you get to that year point, you're going to have that 20 unit value add deal or whatever it looks like for you. So not giving up is so huge. I think that's very important. Mm-hmm. Jeremy, what has been your biggest mistake so far that's turned into a learning lesson?
Oh man. Probably not getting the right people around me earlier. For a long time, I was working by myself and thinking, hey, I'll find everything and then I'll get the team here. Once I got the team in place, things moved a lot faster. So I would say getting the right people around you on your team. Now, I'll say I do not partner with just anybody. I'm very particular about who I want to get into a partnership with. But I should have probably put more effort into that sooner.
Yeah, that's good. This third question is something I've changed up a little bit. It used to be, what's your favorite resource? And everybody always said Bigger Pockets, which is good. Like, I love Bigger Pockets. Definitely go check that out. But it was the same answer every time. So I wanted to change it up a little bit to get some variance and maybe help people out a little bit more. So what's your favorite real estate or business book that's helped you?
I'm going to take one that probably no one said before, but Nudge by Richard Thaler or Cass Sunstein. It's a behavioral economics book, and it just kind of focuses on humans and the biases that we have when we think. And so it kind of speaks a lot towards negotiations and the way you think about real estate. It doesn't talk at all about real estate. I'm just saying it makes you understand who you are and how you think. And so when you're underwriting a deal, when you're negotiating a deal, when you're executing on your plan, if you understand yourself and the ways you could err, I think that's really valuable. So I would say Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein.
Nudge like fudge. I like that.
Yes, Nudge like fudge.
I wrote it down here. I'm going to add that. I'm a big reader, so anything I can read to kind of give me advantage. There it is, right there.
I was looking
there on the shelf.
I think it's behind one of my boxes or something. The office still isn't put together, but yeah, it's on there somewhere.
No, that's good. All right. So next question here. What do you like to do outside of real estate?
I love to read, and I need to be better about carving out time to read, both real estate and not real estate. I'm a big psychology, economics fan. So it's the one I've been working on this for like 6 months now, the origin of wealth. Anything having to do with business, economics, psychology, I love that. So reading, and then I'm also a big playing soccer. I don't really like to watch soccer at all. I love to watch football, but I love to play soccer.
I've never actually played soccer. I feel like I might not have the footwork to play it. I was just a big meathead football player, so I just went straight at people.
I'll just be a goalie. That's what I did.
That's awesome. So, Jeremy, this has been an awesome interview. Where can people find out more about you or connect with you?
Yeah, I'd say my website is the easiest, www.blueridgeinvestmentpartners.com. You learn about the syndications that I do. You can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. I just ask that you have passion about real estate. If you want to reach out and spend some time talking, just please be passionate about it. And that's it.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Jeremy, I think this is a really good episode. Thank you for having the transparency to open up the curtain of this 20 unit deal you just did. I think that's going to be so just crucial in people's development to kind of hear about, stepping through this deal step by step, and you kind of laid it all out there, and you don't get that on a lot of shows. So thank you for doing that. Hope the value add goes well in that the A/B test. I'll be interested to see how that works. And I guess last little question: who's your favorite football team before we get off here?
Oh God, I'm gonna cry. Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if you watched the game yesterday. Did you?
I haven't watched a single football game. I'm a Bears fan, but I haven't watched a single game yet this year. Okay. I know their defense is still doing well because we took down Tom Brady on Thursday Night Football. So I'll take that.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, awesome interview. Thank you again, Jeremy, and we'll get out of here. Talk to you later.
All right, man. See ya.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like the show, if you found value in it, please go to iTunes and leave a rating and review. And if you want to check out more on your multifamily journey, go to multifamilyjourney.com, where you can get free resources to start your journey and figure out your path. That's multifamilyjourney.com. But more importantly, go take action today towards your financial future. See you next time.